Good evening. I am Finn Bell, a poet, blogger, and podcaster from the San Francisco Bay Area. And I would like to welcome you to the third episode of The Poet's Lighthouse. Our wonderful guest today is Toronto-based poet Catherine Graham. Catherine teaches creative writing and currently leads the Toronto International Festival of Authors Book Club. Her body of literary work includes her debut novel, Quarry, which won an Independent Publisher Book Awards Gold Medal for Fiction. Her seventh and latest poetry collection is now out, titled Ether, an out-of-body lyric. I would like to welcome to the Poet's Lighthouse studio today, poet Catherine Graham. Welcome, Catherine.
Thank you, Finn. Lovely to be here.
So lovely to have you. So, Catherine, within your poetry, I see that that the theme deals with ongoing grief, and that is deeply felt. In my own experience, I have found that grief understands grief. Do you feel that in your poetry, it processes this experience for you as well as those who read your poems?
Yes, I think the word process is so crucial with this whole way of dealing with grief because it is a process. And for viewers who have experienced it, depending on if it's fresh or if they've dealt with it for a while, it continues to be part of who that person is.
Yeah.
And I know for me as a poet now, there was a time when I never thought that I would be a poet or that concept was in my mind. But it was the loss of my parents during my university years. So I was just on the cusp of adulthood, and my mother died after a long battle with cancer. And then my father died in a late night car accident. So I'd experienced both the sort of long, prolonged death, which is a visual experience and all encompassing in the family household, and then the knock at the door where your life changes. So in that state of shock and grief and all of those things, and I grew up as an only child, so we lived at this point beside a water-filled limestone quarry. So again, with process and layers, that really worked on my creative imagination as a sort of way of dealing with grief, that so much has emerged, but yet holding that space. And limestone too is blasted to retrieve the rock, so it's a man-made hole. But it was basically a worried friend who suggested that I see a counselor, and the counselor suggested that I keep a journal to write out my feelings and just sort of let the grief come out. And it was one day that I started playing with words and was thinking about the quarry, and I went into a different space in my mind. And when I came out, I knew something different had happened. It wasn't just writing out words to try and figure out what this grief thing was that I was battling and stunned by. It was a place of empowerment, and I actually enjoyed where I went. And when I worked up the courage to show this friend, she said, "You're writing poetry." So it was poems that were speaking to me through the grief. And once that became conscious, poetry's been the core of my life ever since. I can't imagine a life without it. And so my parents and the loss is embedded in all of that. So everything is kind of mixed together for me as a writer.
Yes, I truly feel that in reading what I have of your writing. You brought up the word quarry, and I understand that is the name of the debut novel that you wrote. Do you believe that quarry sort of changed, transformed in what it represented from the beginning to the end? Well, not the end, but to that point of the journey that you were on when you did finish the book.
Well, what's interesting is that my poems also deal with quarry as well, too. So if I look back, and my first book is Pupa, and then The Red Element, and so on, and all of the books have the quarry in it. So I'm clearly obsessed by the quarry, and the quarry is again, and different aspects of it as well. And during this time, I was sort of working with other things, and the material kind of started to work into prose as well. So the quarry's been part of every book that I've written. And quarry just happens to be the title of the novel, but it's part of Ether as well, too. Yeah.
That is beautiful. It's almost like, and I know we discussed this before when we had our previous lovely conversation. You spoke of the feathers being this talisman. I kind of feel that in a way that, the quarry itself having interwoven into the different stories and the different poems also represents in a way, a sort of talisman or a comfort zone.
Absolutely. In fact, I feel sort of an affinity to the word quarry, and I love
Mm.
too how it also is embedded, and words are and meanings are embedded in quarry, and quarry comes from core as in heart. So I think
Mhm.
part of something as well too. It's sort of like the heartbeat of who I am.
That is beautiful. I love that. I love that description
And
and
I
that.
love Finn. I love how you, in our conversation, brought up how grief understands grief and it talks to grief. So it's a whole relationship that grief has with other grievers as well too.
Yes, yes, you're exactly.
Mhm.
Just that short phrase. It was almost like an epiphany, and it had immense power to help heal.
Yeah.
In my case, and I could see that you connected with that when I first mentioned it. It truly does, represent. It truly does that healing power, that powerful magic, where you just mention it to some other person who is experiencing that ongoing grief.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I understand you have brought for us an excerpt from your latest collection, Ether, an out of body lyric, to
Uh-huh.
share with our viewers today. Will you
Sure.
please honor us with a reading of that?
I'd be honored too. Thank you so much. Yes, I'm happy to read this excerpt. And I'll just say as well too that Ether, this is the cover here.
Uh-huh.
It's kind of like a long poem, and so I'll just sort
Mm,
of read little parts of it. But just to give the viewers a sort of an idea of how this works, it's really kind of a homage to family, to
mhm,
cancer, and to the strange windings of truth.
mm,
So things weave in and out in sort of an ether-like state. So I'll start with the
mm.
beginning and then move around a little bit. Okay.
Beautiful.
It's not the hare's scream that haunts. It's the silence that follows. I'm told to breathe in. It isn't work. I'm out before I can shape the air into words. They are slicing the skin at my breast, faceless, blue-dressed figures hovering. I open my eyes. Princess Margaret's white ceiling shines down. Tears, primal deep, waiting to be released, accompany a renewed purity. My mother is a keeper of secrets. Her hair red all her life, even after it grew back in. They had to tell me. I was 11. We had recently moved to the quarry. It's cancer, isn't it? I said, holding my school books tight to my chest. They weren't surprised that I knew, though the reality of my knowing became apparent only after I'd said those words. Mom turned to me. I'm sorry this had to happen to you. This fortune seeing inside dreams beams yellow riddles, questions scut exclamation points. I can't be more than whom. I told my friend I feel like a floating head, and yet my head remains to think and overthink. Damn it, why can't I be the floating headless? We live in vigilance after watching our mothers die. Those twin sexual organs that hold milk for babies and desire for others carry a terror for us. We succumb to having them flatten like pancakes on mammogram plates. We suck in our breath through the winces of pain and ignore the metallic buzzing of the taking image. Our breasts don't belong to us then, squeezed and handled with efficient gloved hands. Molded like Play-Doh, at night we dream they're hacked off. We need to do a biopsy. Parents die in their world, but they never die in their children. And yet a distance remains edged with abstraction. This changed under the spell of anesthesia. Feathers, forever falling from birds. Feathers become my talismans during my months of cancer treatment. City streets, sidewalks, parking lots, feathers from sparrows, seagulls, pigeons. Pigeons wedged in a flower-rimmed scrum, pecking madly for bread. The machine gun stutter of the cardinal. And I remember these words from my first creative writing teacher. Your subject matter chooses you. Death chose me. Ghosts have no substance, require no sustenance, walk through water, stone. And now birds. These creatures with wings that fascinated my mother become a feathered bridge. Be as small as a hole for birds to fly through.
I wanted to take a moment to just digest that. Oh my God, that really spoke to me, the last part where you mentioned the feathered bridge. Um, that touched me so deeply because that is true. It is this connecting factor between a life that was once existing and a present life, but then the life continues in that way.
Mm-hmm. Thank you,
Um,
Finn.
you're welcome. So a few other passages that struck me in the excerpt that you shared with me initially. Um, I In the poem there was a line. I once loved a boy who said he didn't love books. Why read when you can live life instead? He liked to shoot duck and deer and listen to Willie Nelson. Now I've painted his neck red. So here I very much felt the disconnect from a life that didn't quite seem to fit anymore. Can you please tell us more about the experience behind this?
Yeah, it's interesting. Just in terms of when you look back, of course, you can't see the trail of what you're living when you're in it.
Mm-hmm.
But there's certain moments that are sort of liminal and change from A to B. And I think that moment that I was describing too, when at university, when I'd met the therapist, and then the therapist suggested the journal, and the journal led me to poetry.
Mm-hmm.
I was with a person in my life, and it was that young love, and there was this sort of realization, and that where my journey was going to be heading was going to be different from where it was. So, and I think too, when you're working in those moments as a writer, we talked last night too about how much I love the short poem. So how much can something hold or represent a person, a place, a thing? So it almost made sense to sort of key in that this person didn't believe that you needed to read books. It was living life that was more important, and how books then became pivotal to me. I'd always read books, but when you take that writing journey on, you become a reader at a different level, and books were necessary for my growth, and
Mm-hmm.
I needed them.
I love that answer. Yeah, I can completely relate with that as well. They are comforts and necessities. A lot
Yeah,
of people won't agree, but they're old friends. They're old friends
they
to come back
are.
to.
They are, and even covers are part of your life when you go back in your memory, and then you see
Oh,
that cover again, and it's like
yes,
visiting an old friend.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So another line that touched me. Well, there's actually two of them.
Yeah.
First, there was lonely doesn't come from being alone. Lonely is the loss of self with others. We live in vigilance after watching our mothers die. And then later on, parents die in the world, but they never die in their children. And yet a distance remains edged with abstraction. Um, the loss of a parent is inextricable here. And it seems to further bring home the necessary lesson of also not losing yourself. Um,
Yes. Yes. I didn't mean to interrupt there.
No, no, not at all.
I'm so agreeing with that. Absolutely. And I think going with that, there's so much in that space of from having home and a base in people and in place, and then not having that. And at that point, I mean, part of living is going through loss, and I'm at an age now where people are more likely to lose their parents, sort of the natural progression of age. So I went through that at such a young age, and I know many people do as well too. But I think as well, not having that ground at home in a place or in people allows you sort of to lose your sense of who you are and your radar on who people are out there and may not be good for you. And so you're not aware on deeper levels of where danger might be just around the corner. And you learn through experience. And of course, experience is the teacher there, and then moving out of those places.
And do you find that it kind of having that experience can also lead to being tethered for a time to something that is unhealthy, or people and situations that are unhealthy?
It's so interesting. I've been thinking so much about that word tethered. I love how you use that word. And I think it can be such a powerful word and can be a positive or negative depending on what it's tethered to. I mean, as you know as well, there's the image of the floating head, and that's untethered, and that could be a scary place as well. But if you're tethered too tightly to something, that can be constricting, and you're not allowed to be who you need to be. So it's really that sort of balance between having something there, but having that tension have some give to it. So there's ability to grow in that space, that string, rather than be pulled so tightly. There's no room. So yeah, I really think tethered is key in the way, the balance of being tethered or having a tethered life.
Thank you so much for that. I'm sorry, my dogs were barking. What goes on around us?
Dogs love to chat. I totally get it.
They do.
Cats as well too. They have their noise moments as well.
I want to thank you for all the wisdom and insight that you brought, and sharing this deeply personal process and experience with us. Through your poetry, but also through your conversation with me and the viewers. Before we end our session, I want to thank you for gracing us with your presence and your light. And would you have any words of wisdom or lessons that we can take with us?
Well, again, I love how you use the word light. Thank you for your light. And also, this is the Poet's Lighthouse. So I think light is, I think sometimes I'm a frustrated artist and musician because I love music and song and I wish I could sing. And I'm so drawn to light and the magic of light and how artists capture that. So the best I can try and do is put the light not only on things that are uplifting and powerful, but also darkness as well, and examining the whole parameters of life and what it brings us. And through that, giving it sort of less power in a way that it can be destructive, and more power that it can be shared. So again, I think so much of it is that finding that balance. And I think too, for in terms of advice or thoughts on that, I think words are really important, but I also think silence is as well. And what I love about poetry, it's the art of both, because what you leave out is just as important as what you put in. And again, for me in my work and working on drafts, it's trying to find that balance of what isn't there and what is, and to give it that tension and that place too, where then the reader can enter in and it becomes part of the reader's experience, because it's no longer your poem once it's out there as well.
Mm-hmm. I agree with that. You do share it with the rest of the world. So you are definitely sharing that very vital piece of yourself.
Yeah.
Well, we thank you, Catherine, for joining us today. Viewers, please do take the opportunity to read her new collection, Ether and Out of Body Lyric, and find out more about her and her writing at www.catherinegraham, one word, all lowercase.com. As always, we appreciate our viewers for tuning in. Please do not forget to show the Poetry Global Network love by subscribing to our YouTube channel and liking and sharing our videos. Have a good evening.
Thank you, Finn.
Thank